Old millionaire falls for blind raffle seller. Her strength melts his heart. The city of Mexico City never slept. Its streets buzzed with life, its neon lights flickering against the backdrop of ancient architecture. But in the midst of its constant movement, some people remained invisible. Valentina Morales was one of them. Blind since childhood and abandoned by her parents at a young age, she had learned to navigate the unforgiving streets with nothing but a cane, an acute sense of hearing, and an unbreakable spirit. Every day she stood at the same corner near Chapultepec Park, selling raffle tickets for a small charity that helped disabled children. Her dreams were simple: to survive, to help others, and to one day escape the suffocating grip of poverty. Across the city, however, lived a man whose reality couldn't have been more different. Diego Alvarez, heir to the Alvarez Enterprises fortune, was a ruthless businessman known for his cold demeanor and relentless ambition. Money had never been a problem for him. Emotions, however, were a foreign concept. He had built walls around himself, making deals worth millions without blinking, yet feeling nothing beyond the thrill of power, love, sentiment. Those were distractions, weaknesses he had no time for. It was a stormy evening when their worlds collided. Valentina was at her usual spot, the cold wind biting at her skin as she held out a book of raffle tickets. People brushed past her, barely sparing a glance. She heard hurried footsteps, the sound of expensive leather shoes against the pavement, approaching rapidly. Before she could react, a hard body slammed into her, sending her stumbling backward. "Watch where you're going," a deep, irritated voice growled. Valentina barely managed to steady herself. I'm sorry," she stammered, instinctively clutching the book of tickets. Diego Alvarez had never been one to tolerate interruptions. He had been on his phone, too busy closing a deal to notice the fragile woman in his path. His first instinct was to walk away, but something about her gave him pause. The way she stood there, her face tilted slightly as if listening rather than seeing, struck him as odd. His sharp gaze traveled over her modest, worn-out coat, the simple scarf wrapped around her neck, and finally, the white cane at her side. She was blind. For the first time in years, Diego felt something other than indifference, an unfamiliar twinge of guilt. Valentina sensed his hesitation. "I didn't mean to get in your way, sir," she said, her voice soft yet unwavering. "I was just trying to sell these tickets." He should have walked away. He should have ignored her. But instead, he scoffed. "Raffle tickets." She nodded, holding one out. "They're for charity. Each one helps provide resources for children with disabilities." Diego arched a brow. He had never cared for such causes, never spared a thought for people who lived in circumstances so different from his own. But something about this woman, this fragile, blind woman who stood in the cold without an ounce of self-pity, intrigued him. "Fine," he muttered, pulling out his wallet. "I'll take one." Valentina's lips curled into a small smile as she handed him a ticket. "Thank you, sir." As their fingers briefly brushed, a strange sensation passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Diego dismissed it immediately, telling himself it was nothing, just an impulse, a fleeting moment. Little did he know, that moment would change everything. Diego Alvarez had no reason to think of the blind raffle seller again. He had bought the ticket, stuffed it into his coat pocket, and returned to his world of boardrooms, high-stake deals, and icy detachment. Yet, as he sat in his penthouse later that night, whiskey swirling in his glass, he found his mind wandering back to her. The delicate way she had spoken, the quiet strength in her voice, and the way her sightless eyes seemed to pierce through him, seeing something no one else ever had. It unsettled him. By morning, the encounter should have been forgotten, buried beneath layers of contracts and corporate takeovers. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A week later, Diego's assistant, Mateo, entered his office with a curious expression. "Sir, there's something you might want to see." With an arched brow, Diego took the envelope Mateo handed him. He tore it open carelessly and pulled out a small slip of paper. His breath hitched. It was the raffle ticket. The ticket Diego Alvarez held in his hand wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the one he had purchased from Valentina Morales. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It had won. The grand prize was no small sum, $50,000. A drop in the ocean for a man like him. But still, the absurdity of it all struck him. He never played games of chance. He didn't believe in luck. And yet, here it was, proof that fate had pulled him back toward her. Valentina Morales. He should have dismissed it, tossed the ticket aside. But for reasons he couldn't comprehend, he grabbed his coat and walked out of his office, ignoring the questioning looks from his staff. He needed to find her. Valentina sat in her usual spot near Chapultepec Park, the cold harsher that day. Sales had been slow, but she never allowed herself to dwell on disappointment. She simply pulled her coat tighter, her fingers stiff from the chill, and kept calling out to passers-by to support the charity. She didn't expect him to return, not in her wildest dreams. Yet, she heard his footsteps before she smelled the crisp, expensive cologne that lingered around him. There was something unmistakable about the way he carried himself, confident, deliberate, commanding. Miss Morales. His deep voice reached her ears, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. She tilted her head slightly. You remember my name? I do, he said simply, though he didn't understand why. And I believe I owe you something. He pulled out the ticket, pressing it gently into her palm. Her brows furrowed in confusion as she ran her fingers over the paper. You won, he told her, watching her expression carefully. $50,000? Valentina's lips parted in shock. I don't understand. It's your prize, sir. He exhaled sharply. Take it. I can't, she insisted, her fingers curling away from the ticket as if it burned. That's your money. Diego didn't like being defied, but something about her refusal fascinated him. Any other person would have jumped at the chance, would have accepted the money without hesitation, but Valentina, she had too much pride, too much honor, to take something she hadn't rightfully earned. Fine, he said, slipping the ticket back into his pocket. Then, after a pause, an idea formed. If you won't take the money, then work for it. Her brows knitted together. Work? I'll hire you, he said bluntly. I need an assistant, nothing complicated. Answer calls, schedule meetings, basic tasks. She let out a soft, incredulous laugh. Sir, in case you haven't noticed, I'm blind. I noticed, he said, his voice low. And I don't see how that stops you from working. Valentina opened her mouth to argue, but the confidence in his tone, the certainty with which he spoke, made her hesitate. A billionaire offering her a job? It sounded absurd, impossible. Yet, standing there in the cold, hearing the sincerity in his voice, she felt something stir inside her, a flicker of hope, of possibility. One condition, she said after a long pause. He arched a brow. And that is, I work for the money, no handouts. A smirk tugged at his lips. Agreed. And just like that, their fates became entwined. Valentina still couldn't believe what she had agreed to. A week ago, she had been selling raffle tickets on a freezing street corner, her world confined to the scent of damp concrete and the rhythm of hurried footsteps passing her by. Now, she was sitting in the back seat of a black luxury car, the warmth of the leather seats unfamiliar, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. She had learned enough about Diego Alvarez from whispered conversations on the streets and snippets of news broadcasts in passing. He was a ruthless businessman, a man who made and broke fortunes with a flick of his wrist. People either feared him or admired him, but no one ignored him. And now, for reasons she couldn't understand, he had brought her into his world. The car stopped. Valentina heard the soft click of the door opening, followed by his deep voice. We're here. She hesitated only for a moment before reaching for her cane. Before she could move, a firm hand grasped hers. Let me, Diego said, guiding her out of the car. His touch was brief, impersonal, yet it sent an unfamiliar heat through her skin. Thank you, she murmured, pulling her hand away as soon as her feet touched the ground. Don't expect it to happen often, he remarked dryly, leading her toward the entrance. She could feel the difference in the air as soon as she stepped inside the building, the quiet hum of conversations, the faint clacking of heels on marble floors, and the underlying scent of fresh paper and polished wood. It was a stark contrast to the streets. Diego led her to his office, his steps measured and confident. Valentina followed, her cane tapping lightly against the floor. When they reached his desk, he gestured to a chair. Sit. She did, her hands resting on her cane. What exactly will I be doing? Answering calls, managing my schedule, organizing files, he said, his tone businesslike. Nothing you can't handle. She nodded, though her mind was racing. And if I make a mistake? Don't, he said simply. I don't tolerate mistakes. Valentina's jaw tightened. I'll do my best. Good, he said, leaning back in his chair, because I don't give second chances. She swallowed hard, her pride warring with her nerves. Understood. Later that day, Valentina sat at her desk, her fingers brushing over the braille keyboard Diego had provided. She was determined to prove herself, to show him that she was more than just a blind woman he had taken pity on. But as the hours passed, the weight of his expectations pressed down on her. When Diego returned from a meeting, he found her struggling with the stack of files. Problem? He asked, his tone sharp. She took a deep breath. I'm having trouble organizing these. I can't see the labels. He frowned. Then figure it out. I didn't hire you to make excuses. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to back down. I'm not making excuses. I'm asking for help. For a moment, they stared at each other, her defiance meeting his cold detachment. Then, to her surprise, he sighed. Fine, I'll have someone assist you. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Just don't make it a habit. Valentina had known all her life that people like Diego Alvarez didn't waste time on people like her. So, when his assistant's sharp, efficient voice interrupted their conversation, she wasn't surprised. Mr. Alvarez, your meeting with the board is in 10 minutes. Push it back, Diego said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The assistant hesitated. Sir, the board... I said push it back, he repeated, his voice colder this time. Valentina could feel the confusion in the assistant's silence. She knew what they were thinking. Who was this blind woman at his side? Why had Diego Alvarez, a man known for his ruthless efficiency, delayed a meeting for her? He didn't offer an explanation. Instead, his hand brushed against the small of her back, guiding her forward. Let's go. Valentina swallowed hard. She had no idea what she had gotten herself into. The office was larger than most apartments Valentina had lived in. She could sense the vast space around her, the echo of their footsteps, bouncing off high ceilings and glass walls. The air was thick with the scent of leather and expensive wood. Have a seat, Diego said. She reached forward cautiously, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of a chair before she settled in. A beat of silence passed. Why me? She finally asked. Diego, who had been pouring himself a drink, stilled. Excuse me? You could hire anyone, she said, folding her hands in her lap. An experienced assistant. Someone who isn't... She hesitated. Blind. He exhaled slowly, taking a sip of his drink before responding. You're right. Her lips parted slightly at his bluntness. But let's get one thing clear, he continued, his voice smooth and calculated. I don't make decisions out of pity. I saw potential. You don't accept charity. You refuse to be a victim. And you have more backbone than most people I deal with daily. Valentina's fingers tightened around the fabric of her dress. I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge me, he continued. Someone who can handle pressure. And for some reason, I have a feeling you can. She wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or insulted. Diego leaned forward slightly, his presence impossible to ignore. So, are you in or out? Valentina took a slow breath. She had spent years being overlooked, pitied, dismissed. And now, for the first time, someone was looking at her, not as a helpless blind girl, but as someone capable. She lifted her chin. I'm in. A slow, satisfied smirk tugged at his lips. Good, he murmured. Then let's get to work. And just like that, the game had begun. Valentina had never been so exhausted in her life. Working for Diego Alvarez was like being thrown into a storm with no warning. From the moment she stepped into his office, she was bombarded with tasks, instructions, and challenges that left her breathless. But she refused to falter. With the help of adaptive technology and her sharp memory, she quickly learned to navigate her new environment. Diego's schedule was chaos incarnate, but she memorized every detail. His calls were ruthless, but she transcribed and relayed them with precision. She could feel the stares of his employees, the skepticism in their hushed whispers, but she pushed through it all. And then there was him. Diego was infuriating, arrogant, demanding, and impossibly stubborn. But he was also something else. She noticed it in the way his voice softened just slightly when he gave her instructions, in the way he walked beside her instead of ahead, in the way his touch, though rare, was always careful, deliberate. And she hated the way it made her feel. It had been a particularly grueling day, and by the time the office cleared out, Valentina was ready to collapse. She sat at her desk, rubbing her temples, when she heard his deep voice from the doorway. "You're still here." She straightened instantly. "I was just finishing up." Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps. She could feel him moving closer before his voice dropped lower. "You should go home." Valentina hesitated. "I will. Soon." Another pause. Then, to her shock, she felt the warmth of his fingers as he reached for her hand. Her breath caught. "You're overworking yourself," Diego muttered, his thumb grazing her palm in a fleeting, almost unconscious movement. "Take care of yourself, Morales." Valentina wanted to pull away, to tell herself that this was nothing, meant nothing. But for some reason she couldn't move. The air between them was charged, heavy with something unsaid. And then, just as quickly as he had touched her, he was gone. Valentina exhaled shakily. What the hell was happening between them? She couldn't stop thinking about it, the way his fingers had brushed against her skin, the way his voice had dropped low and almost gentle. It was unlike the Diego Alvarez she knew, the ruthless, calculating businessman who didn't believe in attachments. And yet, something was changing between them. Valentina felt it in the stolen moments, when Diego lingered just a second too long, in the way he said her name, as if testing its weight on his tongue, in the silence that stretched between them, thick with something she couldn't name. But she refused to be foolish. Men like Diego didn't fall for women like her. She was blind, poor, insignificant in his world of wealth and power. Whatever this was, whatever strange pull existed between them, it wasn't real. It couldn't be. So, she buried it, pushed it deep down, where it couldn't touch her. That resolve lasted exactly 3 days. It shattered the moment she stepped into his office late one evening to deliver a report. "Sir, I have the—" She stopped because she felt it before anything else. The tension, the heat. She didn't need sight to know he wasn't alone. The faint rustle of fabric, the scent of expensive perfume, not hers. The sound of a woman's voice, low and sultry. A woman in his office. Valentina's stomach twisted violently. She shouldn't care. She didn't care. Yet, something inside her clenched when she heard the unmistakable sound of lips meeting skin. She turned on her heel, heart pounding. "Morales!" His voice cut through the air, sharp. She froze. She heard the woman giggle, the sound grating against her ears. Valentina swallowed, forced herself to keep her voice steady. "I didn't mean to interrupt." She took a step back, gripping her cane tighter than necessary. "I'll come back later." Valentina. Her breath hitched. He never called her that, but she wouldn't turn around. Instead, she simply nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good night, Mr. Alvarez." And then she walked away, leaving whatever this was behind. Or at least, she tried to. Valentina barely slept that night. She told herself it didn't matter, that Diego Alvarez's personal life was none of her concern, that he could have as many women in his office, in his bed, in his world as he pleased. But the tightness in her chest wouldn't go away. She hated herself for feeling anything at all. Because what exactly had she expected? That a man like Diego, wealthy, powerful, devastatingly handsome, would see anything more in her than a charity case? A novelty? She had been a fool to think the tension between them meant something. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would walk away. The office was silent when she arrived, earlier than usual. She wanted to leave her resignation letter on his desk and be gone before he even stepped into the building. But of course, fate had other plans. The moment she opened his office door, his voice cut through the air. "You're quitting." Not a question, a statement. Valentina stiffened, gripping the envelope in her hands. "Yes." A long silence stretched between them. Then, the sound of footsteps, measured, deliberate. And then he was there. Too close. "Why?" She inhaled sharply, keeping her face neutral. "Because this was never supposed to be permanent." The word was low, furious. Her fingers curled into fists. "I appreciate the opportunity you gave me, but look at me and say that." Her breath hitched. "You know I can't." Another silence. Then, softly, "That's the problem, isn't it?" Valentina's throat tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," he murmured. And then, warm fingers brushed against her wrist. A shiver ran down her spine. "I never wanted this," he admitted, his voice rough. "Never planned for it." Her pulse pounded. "Then forget it." "I can't." It was barely a whisper. Her heart twisted. This wasn't supposed to happen. But then his fingers traced higher, over her palm, up her arm, slow, hesitant, as if giving her time to pull away. She didn't. "Tell me to stop," he said. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. His fingers brushed against her jaw, tilting her face upward. She felt the heat of his breath, the tension coiling so tightly between them, it was unbearable. Her lips parted. And then, a knock at the door. The spell shattered. Diego pulled back instantly, his body stiffening. Valentina stepped away, forcing air into her lungs. "Come in," he said, his voice unreadable. The door opened. His assistant, oblivious to what had just almost happened, stepped inside with a stack of documents. Valentina clenched her fists. She needed to leave. Now. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the office, her heart racing. Diego watched her go, his jaw clenched. He had been so close to crossing a line he had sworn he would never cross. And yet, the moment she had walked away, he felt the weight of her absence like a physical blow. He turned to his assistant, his voice cold. "What is it?" The assistant hesitated, sensing the tension in the room. "The board is waiting for you, sir." Diego nodded, his mind already elsewhere. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." As the assistant left, Diego stared at the door Valentina had just walked through. He had spent his entire life building walls, keeping people at arm's length. But Valentina Morales, she had slipped through his defenses like a whisper in the dark. And now, he wasn't sure he wanted to stop her. Valentina placed the envelope on his desk, her fingers trembling slightly. "I meant what I said," she whispered, and then she turned and walked away, leaving him behind. Or at least, she tried to. Because Diego Alvarez never let go of something he wanted, and he wasn't about to start now. Valentina didn't look back. She kept walking, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The weight of the resignation letter she had left behind felt like a stone pressing against her chest, but she forced herself forward. She had done the right thing. She had to believe that. But as she stepped outside into the biting cold, gripping her cane like it was the only thing holding her together, she heard him. "Valentina." Her breath caught. She didn't turn around. "Go back inside, Mr. Alvarez," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not happening," he replied, his tone sharp. She exhaled sharply. "You don't get to do this." "Do what?" "Chase after me like I mean something to you." Silence, then softly, "You do." Her fingers tightened around her cane. "Don't." "You think I don't care?" He was closer now, his voice rough with something raw, unfiltered. "You think I didn't feel it every damn time I was near you?" She squeezed her eyes shut. "It doesn't matter." "Like hell it doesn't." A gust of wind rushed between them, but neither moved. Finally he spoke again, quieter this time. "You want to know why I hired you?" Valentina didn't answer. "I could have ignored you that night," he admitted. "I should have." A bitter chuckle. "Would have saved me a hell of a lot of trouble." She swallowed hard. But I couldn't, he continued, his voice closer now. Too close. Because something about you, your strength, your fire, made me want to be near you. And I hated it. Hated you for making me feel something I swore I never would. Valentina's lips parted, but she had no words. So yeah, Morales, he said roughly, I do give a damn. Her heart ached. But you don't love me, she whispered. Silence, then. Say that again. She hesitated. You don't. A sharp exhale. And then, warm hands cupping her face. Her breath hitched. You really think I'd be here if I didn't? Diego's voice was low, trembling with emotion. Valentina's pulse stopped, and then his lips met hers. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was undeniable. A confession in the form of a kiss. His hands cradled her face as if she were something precious, as if she were the only thing in his world that mattered. And as she clutched the front of his coat, her own walls crumbling, she realized something. She loved him too, blindly, unconditionally, completely. When they finally broke apart, Diego's forehead rested against hers, his breathing unsteady. Stay, he murmured. Tears burned behind her eyes. Ask me again, she whispered. A pause, then a smile against her lips. Stay with me, Valentina. And this time, she said yes. Months later, Valentina Morales was no longer the woman standing on a cold street corner, selling raffle tickets. She was home. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. Diego had given her more than a job. He had given her a life filled with warmth, laughter, and love. They sat together on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the glittering skyline of Mexico City. The air was warm, the night alive with the hum of the city below. Valentina leaned into Diego, her head resting on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. He turned to her, his green eyes searching hers. Regret what? Taking a chance on me. A slow smile spread across his face. You're the best decision I ever made, Valentina. Her heart swelled. Even though I'm blind, especially because you're blind, he said, his voice gentle. You taught me how to see. She smiled, her fingers intertwining with his. And you taught me how to trust. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered to life around them, they both knew. This was where they were meant to be. Together. Diego pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice soft. I love you, Valentina. She turned to him, her heart full. I love you too, Diego. And as they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, the world faded away. Because love, they realized, wasn't about seeing, it was about feeling. And for the first time in their lives, they felt whole.